Well, thank you. Look, when I left NBC, the number one thing I wanted to focus on was figuring out how we lost trust. And it was pretty easy to me. Nobody ever trusted national media. We don't trust national chains on anything, do we, right? We don't trust national. We trust what we know. It's local. And when we kicked out that foundation, it turned out any credibility I got was derivative credibility from local representatives. And so gutting local news gutted our credibility. And so we got to just pick up, stop complaining about it, pick up our bootstraps and rebuild this thing one step at a time. So look, the conversation we're going to have here is with essentially what I would call the VCs of this rebuilding of local news. I don't know if they want to be known as venture capitalists because they're much kinder and much nicer than venture capitalists. Welcome to all of them. John, are you okay if I called you a VC?
Unexpected to be called a VC, but I'll take it if it means I'm helping.
It is, and it is. I mean, look, that's what we're doing. And I've been thinking, I know we think about this current landscape, and there is a depression that hits sometimes. But fall of 23, I think, we're at the Texas Tribune Festival. The festival was over. They had an extra dinner, and you were the special guest. And you were essentially announcing what this press forward thing was going to be. And this is 2023. And it was one chapter that you guys were announcing at the time. So the point is, everything is, there's a lot of good things happening. Yesterday I was involved with something called Local News Day. Many of you, I think, were participants in it. It was an awareness campaign, and it was the founder of the Montana Free Press's idea to do this, which is just a reminder that, we can all work together in a national way to help everybody locally. So 2023, it's one. We're up to 45 chapters now. So that exponential growth, do we continue to expect it?
I hope so. And first of all, thank you, Chuck, for making the time to be here and to bring a national perspective to something that is fundamentally local. But I think that's the story here, right? Which is that we all have a common enterprise, which is our democracy, and it has to ground in place. And so going back just a couple of years, if you had said to me, at that moment, that 2 years later we would have the governor of the state talking about the very best public policy in the country supporting local news right after Local News Day, and that Tracy Bain would have, with Stacey Reed, invited so many people into the Union League Club that we would have turned people away for weeks, I would have thought you were bonkers. Like this is an extraordinary, I think, amount of progress. And so if we could go from where we have 2 years ago to today and then keep on that curve, I think we'll be in great shape. But actually, I think it's important to say we have to, because the stakes are so high right now, and also the challenge is so sincere. And we are working not only with tailwinds, but with, of course, some important headwinds. So I absolutely see it, and I hope we will do it.
Maribel, it's interesting with the Knight Foundation, you've had to sort of move them a little bit more into the, move everybody more into the local news space. And what's interesting that I found is you also have been, it was new when you started supporting some for-profit models, not just nonprofit models, in that we're looking for any model that works when it comes to which news organizations work and which models work. Has that been an easy transition with the foundation itself?
One thing I want to put an edit on is I certainly did not have to bring Knight Foundation to the world of journalism or the importance of local journalism. This is who we are. This is what we do. I might have brought a little bit of my sense of urgency from the field and the need to move with much greater agility to meet this moment and to meet the challenge before us. That is true. But to your question about, for-profit versus not-for-profit, I mean, we're trying to solve an enormous challenge and maybe arguably the most critical thing we will do, which is ensure access to reliable information for every community in America. You can't do that by taking some of the players off the field. You can't do that effectively if you say, we're only going to try to solve this through a nonprofit lens or through a new startup lens or through a digital media lens versus a broadcast or print lens or what have you. No, you need every player on the field. You need organizations that are deeply rooted in their communities, that understand their audience, that understand what their audiences need, are willing to commit to doing that work. And that comes in a lot of models. So no, I don't think any of us should be turning the blinders to any part of this ecosystem.
Julie, the Joyce Foundation really concentrated in helping Chicagoland and all of this. How do you measure success in your investments? In the foundation's investment, and what are you looking for when you decide to help out certain entities?
Well, I think, first of all, I wanted to take a moment just to acknowledge the fact that Press Forward exists because national foundations recognize the importance of local news, and that's momentous. I came from a large national foundation, and it's so easy at a national foundation to sit back and fund national organizations, national news outlets. But what MacArthur, what Knight, and other national foundations did is they recognized the critical importance of local news. And so me, as a former public health official, government official, we were so reliant on local news to inform our public, to get them connected, to have them engaged, and then also to hold us accountable as government officials to making sure that we were responsive to our community's needs. And so for Joyce, we have been committed to this kind of work for a long time, but for me personally, I have great examples of how Southside Weekly was communicating about West Nile virus spraying, or how WTTW was contacting me and saying, talk about the Southwest Side environmental justice issues and holding me accountable for that kind of work. I feel like it is so incredible for a strong, robust democratic society that we have a strong local news network, and thanks to the national funders here for actually supporting this effort overall.
Let's talk about the, look, the next few years, we're actually going to see even more disruption in local news. The Nexstar-Tegna merger, what we've seen with legacy newspapers over the last 10 to 15 years, we are going to see with local television news, or what is, I always say, do we even call it television? Local visual news, if you will, right? We're going to see duopolies. We're going to see, now I look at it as an opportunity. It means we're going to have a lot of good local news journalists looking for work, which means there might be new startups to fund. But when you think about the next 5 years, we saw Tim's map, but what's urgent, and how are each of you looking at this next? Frankly, it's going to be a bit apocalyptic in the local TV news space. How are you looking at that, and are there some ways you're thinking about? Well, where there's destruction, there's opportunity.
I'm happy to start.
Miami has the largest city in the country with a duopoly.
That's right. But before we get to that, we have to get to job one. Job one, if we hope to change the trajectory of Tim's map, if we hope to safeguard those things we all care about, job one is we need to do a lot of work to strengthen the First Amendment, because without that, none of the rest of this will be possible. And the level of assault that we are all together seeing on the First Amendment today is without precedent in my lifetime. And we have to all lock arms on the fact that we are only as free as our First Amendment is strong. So we don't get to have the strong, robust local news environment. We don't get to have strong civic infrastructure without that. And so that's job one.
It would be nice if certain corporations would use the Constitution. It was there, Mr. Iger, to name names.
100%.
But it was catastrophic. I mean, the First Amendment's on the piece of paper if you don't use it.
100% right. I mean, it is up to all of us to exercise those rights, to demand that those rights be upheld, or you're right, they're only as good as the paper they're written on. So 100%, and that's what we're seeing. I mean, we all know this. We all know our history. We understand that most of the time, power is not taken away, it is given away. And so it's really, really crucially important that we not lose sight of that, and that we stand strong on that first and foremost. Not only on behalf of our own news outlets, but on behalf of all people, on behalf of whether we agree or disagree, it doesn't matter. Everybody has those rights and needs to exercise them. So that's job one. The second piece, and we're sitting here in the state of Illinois that has led the way, and Senator Sodelman has had a big role to play in this, but leading the way and showing how public policy is one more part of the toolkit to support that ecosystem. And I think that is something else that we have to think about. There's been a lot of debate about public funding for media, and we talk about government funding, and we talk about government. We need to pick our words carefully. The government is the people, and those dollars belong to the people, and they should fund the priorities of the people. And a critical priority of the people has to be ensuring access to reliable news and information on which we can make good decisions, hold our government accountable, connect with one another, center community. So these things are all absolutely important to talk about the change in trajectory. And I don't want to get to a place of apocalyptic, but these things are critical to get right now.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what I think you mentioned that I think really this is a time for all hands on deck. Everybody has a role to play. Philanthropy alone cannot solve this problem. Government alone cannot solve this problem. But it goes to the essence of when many of the speakers have already said that a strong local news ecosystem is a public good. And so we all have a role to play in shoring it up. And so Joyce has for many years supported individual news outlets in the region, the six Great Lakes state region, and we've done that. We also support research. So we supported the research that was shared, the data that was just shared with everybody. We also look at evaluating the research as well, and supporting the policy work in the state of Illinois, and evaluating the policy so we can say, what can we do to make it better, to make it stronger? Because we do these innovative kinds of things, but we need to test them and make sure that they are as strong as they can be, and also refine them, and then share those models elsewhere. So it's not just about supporting the individual outlets, it's about doing the research to understand what else needs to be done. It's about supporting evaluation. It's about supporting innovation as well. So there's new models that we can test and apply and then share that knowledge. And that's the beauty of Press Forward National and the Press Forward local chapters, is that we can, on the ground, experiment, do some really innovative, exciting kinds of things, and then there's a national infrastructure to spread that throughout the country so that other best practices can be adopted. So that's the kind of thing that we need to do in this moment. Like you said, a crisis is also an opportunity.
Well, that's why you sounded like a VC, just there. and no, I mean that in a good way. Like, it's a terrible, I get it, but frankly, the private equity world thinks journalism is something to extract value from, right? We're trying to look at it another way, and John, there are two news organizations in particular that to me are just get at how philanthropy can then serve as sort of a seed, literally a seed, and it's the Baltimore Banner, a new organization, and the Salt Lake Tribune, 150 years old, where local wealthy people or person gave a big chunk of change and said, here's a 5-year runway, here's a 10-year runway, and then let's make it sustainable. Not every community can do that, but that is essentially the goal here, right?
No question. And if we want to embrace the venture capital model, which I'll do for the moment, a venture capitalist for the public good here for news, this is an undercapitalized field.
Yes.
So how many people here are development officers or otherwise responsible for the revenue line of your thing? Okay, so bless you for doing that, or former ones, I know, or once and former. Do any of you think there's enough money in the field, right? Would anybody, no, okay, so there are not enough people funding. So part of the answer, I think, is for every person here, regardless of our role, we should be a funder. Okay, individually, we should be subscribing, right? We should get our kids to subscribe, our parents to subscribe, all that kind of stuff, or to be an advertiser and so forth. And if we are a funder of anything as an organized matter, as a family, as a foundation, we need to be investing in this, and we need to put a whole lot more money into the business. So the reason I'm so excited about the numbers that Dale just described earlier, not only do we start with only a couple of chapters now at 45, we start with 22 funders. Really, we start with 3 funders, but we started with 22 funders when we announced. We're well over 130 organized funders. There just needs to be more capital in. And when I think about my role, if there's any funder, organized funder in here, whose door I haven't darkened, let me know. I will be there, and Tracy Bain has probably been after me. We've all been organizing in this way. But I do think that a part of what we can do, each of us, is say, what's our position? How do we play our position at this moment when our democracy calls on us to do this work? I would put on my law professor hat and say, I've got to argue for the rule of law. All those things are also true. But every single one of us can put capital into the space, and we can't put enough as organized philanthropy, but we do need to put in the venture capital to make sure there are sustainable and effective community-oriented approaches.
Let's talk about different models. What's, Maribel, what's one that you've been impressed with and think, oh, this might be more replicatable than I thought when we funded, Venture X?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things that come to mind, certainly at a local to national scale. One, the American Journalism Project. The American Journalism Project, and it's built on the thesis that you can help support the startup digital news environment across the country. Nonprofit model primarily, but what's it doing that is different and is helping on the sustainability front? It really is a network. It is helping to bring costs down because it is providing a network of central resources. A lot of the back office stuff, a lot of that, if everyone had to do it on their own, is just cost prohibitive and really makes it so that the model doesn't work. So that is an example of something that we continue to see working and scale and just needs continued funding to support. That is one. I would say, and I'm looking at Steve Waldman here, I would say Report for America, now Report Local, is another amazing example that has incredible scale. And what did it set out to do? It set out to make sure that newsrooms all over the country had access to lower cost reporting resources by sharing the costs. The latest iteration of that, and NIDA is supporting this, is also building the fundraising muscle at local news outlets, because to the smattering of development officers here, we need a lot more of those people who know how to raise money in support of local news. And so Report Local is not only helping to provide the reporting resource, but also helping on the sustainability front by building that fundraising muscle. Another that I'll call out that is not yet in the US, but Village Media in Canada.
I love that model.
Absolutely terrific model. For profit. They are in 27 Canadian markets, small to medium size, 20,000 to 150,000 population. All 27 are profitable. All 27 are debt-free, highly engaged audiences because they're doing the work that community cares about. But they are a part of the fabric of that community because they are taking some of their profits and reinvesting them back into the nonprofit community in their community. That's huge, and that's important.
And Village Media has also then created its own social media. Like they've been able to so disengage from what Google did to local news. In some ways, by building this, they ended up building their own social
They have their own tech end to end, and I think that's very powerful. So those are just three examples.
Yeah, so from a local or regional level, I think one of the examples that comes to mind is, I guess I'll stop first and say that philanthropy, as opposed to venture capitalists, we're not looking at dollars as the outcome or the return. We're looking at informed communities, engaged communities. We're looking at accountability of government. And so when I look at what happened recently with an election of, Chicago has its first time elected school board. Joyce Foundation supported Chalkbeat, and they provided investigative reporting. They also provided a lot of information and got it into the hands of the public about the different candidates that were running, what was at risk. They created forums for people to hear from the candidates themselves. And we had an amazing turnout to vote for the school board election. And there was a lot of concern that people weren't going to show up, but they did show up. And then the outcome of the election ended up with very diverse representation on the school board itself, different than what I think people were afraid of would actually happen. And so at a very local level, the beauty and the privilege that philanthropy has is we don't have to look at dollars returned. We can look at what happens in our communities, and what we saw was record turnout for a school board election, and we saw an outcome that was something that will lead to more accountability, hopefully, for our government.
Now I want to get to sort of, each of these independent local startups are in different phases. And those that are in year 4, year 5, or take the Texas Tribune at year 10, right? You hit this plateauing, right? And you're like, okay, how do I break through and get, what do you see as the challenges you've noticed so far at the more mature startups, the teenagers, if you will?
Chuck, you did me one disservice by not letting me be a Chicagoan earlier.
I apologize. I should.
But you did me a service by having me not pick a favorite grantee, which whoever gave you that question was being mean to foundation presidents, because we can't do that. But now I get to answer a different question than what I feared I had to. But I think actually Chicago does have a few examples of slightly older experiments that are ones worth watching and are being watched across the country. So certainly the merger at Chicago Public Media between the number 2 newspaper, number 1 in many respects, but the number 2 size-wise, Sun-Times, alongside the amazing WBZ radio.
I've been watching it. I remember when the marriage happened, you're like, really?
What's that?
Yeah.
Yes. Now, how much money is in public media right now from the federal government? There are no public dollars, literally no public dollars. Many of us have put money into a bridge fund. Thank you to Maribel and Public Media Company and others who have done this. So there is a big question. What is public media without federal public money? And I think that has to be answered. This model here in Chicago, what CPM is doing, is one chance to take a look at that and do it. I think it's extremely exciting for lots of reasons, but that's one that I think is out there. A second one, the Reader, which of course Tracy had a huge hand in. This is an organization that has a storied, incredible, rich, community-connected past that has really struggled financially in the last few years, despite lots of efforts. It has a brand new model. It is part of a broader effort to link it up with ticket sales and events and so forth. I think people across the country are very excited about the alt weeklies linking up with Brady Walkinshaw and what's going to happen there. That's a really exciting model. And a third one I'd put that's sort of more at scale as well. You mentioned the sort of billionaire dumping in some money, starting a new thing. The difficulty is sometimes billionaires change their mind and they get out. So DNA Info would be an example of that. Next day, the journalists who are doing it, or however many days later, said, we're starting Block Club Chicago, right? And I just saw Maple, wherever the amazing Maple is. She left MacArthur Foundation staff to go work over there, and they are kicking butt, obviously, and they are doing amazing events. And So I think there are, right here in Chicago, absolutely brand new startups, which is awesome. And there are these really interesting sort of medium-sized, maybe teenaged organizations that I think will be an example. And by the way, the fact that we are doing this here, I don't think there's a state in the country that could pull this off, right? I think this right now shows that Illinois and Chicago is absolutely going for it, and I think that's actually one thing we're trying to do is raise the bar for the rest of the country, both at an organizational level through Press Forward, but also by having the examples to each of these questions that are going to inspire people across the country.
Maribel, I was looking, and since we're Southerners, I guess, although I used
Really?
to, I know. In Florida.
I don't think Miami would say that.
In Florida, we don't get anything right. You have to go north to go south. It's really strange, right? But I'm weirdly singling out Night here simply because one thing stuck out to me about Tim's map. The news deserts are in the Black Belt of the South. Mm-hmm. This is you want to talk about a double whammy,
Yeah.
right? It is the challenge. How would you advise a young entrepreneur who wants to bring local news to the black rural communities of Alabama? What's the best way to get started? How do they get your attention for help? Because I looked at that map and I look at everything like a political map. Forgive me, but I looked at it. They're like, wow, that's already a struggle, and they're also like the leading news desert in the South.
No, look, it is an enormous struggle, and I think that's what we lose sight of in this, sort of politically charged environment at a national level. When you talk about the defunding of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, what you actually did was further undermine access to reliable news and information, trusted news and information, by the way, the people say this, in precisely these places, in the rural South in particular. And so it is an enormous challenge. But at the end of the day, you have to get very proximate. I mean, all the studies show it. You mentioned this. Others have said this. We had a Knight Pew study that showed 3/4 of people say they trust their local news sources.
Always the case.
It's always been the
only
case.
trusted people, and I always say, you know why? Because they go outside every day and fact check us. They fact check local. They get to find out, oh, the weatherman was right.
And by the way, your kids are in school together, and you're meeting each other on the soccer field, and they're, all of the
100%.
things, right? Like that proximity matters so much. And so you see it. I mean, look at Mississippi today. There is great trust, and there is still quality news that's happening. But there is no question that all of us need to pay attention not only at the national level, not only at our big metro cities, where we still have, in most cases, as much as there is still struggle, an abundance of riches as relates to local news. But if we want to improve this nation civically, strengthen democracy, we all funders need to pay a lot more attention to putting dollars into communities like we see on that map.
And it has to be locally owned, because
It has to be.
I will tell you what happens when your local newspaper is not owned by somebody who grew up in your community. You end up without any local news anymore. I will introduce you to Jeff Bezos of the Washington Post. I'm convinced, no, it's just like with a sports team. If the local person, if it isn't somebody from the community, they will move your team, because they didn't grow up and understand. I promise you, Mr. Bezos wouldn't have done that to the Miami Herald, or he wouldn't have done that in Seattle, communities he actually lived in. And he didn't live in the community.
So I think that's right, but then I would take that further and get back to this point. We're here because of Press Forward. What is the number one thing that, if we have an aspiration for what Press Forward will ultimately be? And we're seeing it already. You see it in the chapters that have been created. You see it in gatherings like this. And that is animating in local people their own sense of agency, their own sense of responsibility in supporting access to reliable news and information in their community, because it is about them, because it matters to them, because they understand that that is essential to the well-being of their community. And so the lasting legacy here ultimately has to be not that we have any number of national funders looking at this from a national perspective, but that we have helped to animate in people, in communities, that sense of local ownership. When I was a publisher, when I was running local news organizations, there was not one single customer who ever called me who didn't start by saying, my paper, right? That is a reality. And so then that means that that community needs to take part in helping to support access to that. And you've seen it. What's happened? We've seen a rise up of investment in their local public radio stations and television stations. You see it when newspapers are on the brink and people rally and donate and support because they understand how important this is. And that's what we need to do more of, and Press Forward will be successful if at the end of the day, there's not something national that we're talking about, but that every community has that sense of investment in access to local news.
Julie, talk about the Great Lakes region. That's what your foundation wants to invest in.
That's right.
It's finding local partners, though, because if they don't have agency, it's not going to succeed, right?
So building on what Maribel was saying, it's the ownership of these outlets, but it's also the work that's being done in the communities itself. And so we have examples, like we were early funders of the City Bureau, which actually created this Documenters project, which is spread throughout the country, which really gets people trained from the community to go, they can get trained and they get paid to go into community and document public meetings and then report on them. And those people are trusted sources of information, and so the trust is essential.
The documenter model can feature any subject. It can work for youth sports. It can work for the band concerts. Like this documenter model is brilliant.
Yeah. We also support work in the Detroit area, so it's the Outlier Media and then also Milwaukee Neighborhood News Services, which actually goes into listening to community, because I think we can't earn the trust of our communities unless we listen first and understand what it is that they need to know, what they want to hear. And so these kinds of the models are the things that we're supporting, because we really feel like building that trust is essential. Yeah.
John, you wanted to?
I just want to say, I think you're right to point to the headwind that is many of the places that have the most concerning news deserts have the least capital, right? Political capital, the least
political capital.
And right now, frankly, money, capital, dollar capital. So I think the national funders do have to do cross-subsidy. So we are absolutely, we intend to be and are the largest funder in Chicago where the money was made from MacArthur, but Sylvia Rivera is also leading investment in the borderlands with Mexico, the area that has Spanish language news deserts that otherwise are not getting funded, and helping to foment something there, and likewise in Appalachia. So we are picking a few regions where we can help. We can't do 30,000 communities across America, but we certainly can help in local areas. And so I think we do need nationally organized efforts to do some of this cross-subsidy as well as going deep in our own communities.
Look, one thing I haven't done here is complain about the algorithms of the big 5 tech companies that in some ways created this mess. What's a good way to work with these folks? Some of them realize that it was pretty destructive and they want to help, but I think they don't know how to help.
The tech companies we're talking about. Look, I think many of them have from time to time, I think sincerely and legitimately worked to be helpful. You look at Google. The Google News Initiative has invested a lot in, and in local news, I will say in particular. I think that's important. I think that the number one thing that, and this is changing as you know, Gen AI is completely disrupting, in some cases, you know, their own businesses, and certainly disrupting search and all of that. But I think the number one thing that I always felt I needed running local newsrooms was greater transparency as to how to even optimize, how to think
Tell us how it works.
Tell us how it works, right? Because the work that we do as journalists is only ultimately going to matter as much as it's reaching the audience, and as much as it's helping to really inform and equip people to participate, to make decisions, to take part in their communities and in civic life. And so the fact that there's this level of opacity around how to even do that effectively, and that it can change on a dime. You think you've got it figured out, and then it changes on a dime.
And it's bankrupted news organizations.
Yeah. So that is probably the number one thing. I think greater partnership and greater transparency. And I don't know that that's going to come only
Where's our
from
politicians? Come on, guys. That's where you guys are going to come in and force them to. Look, we cannot allow ourselves to go over time when a actual elected governor didn't go over his time. So we've hit triple zeros. John Palfrey, Maribel, Pérez, Wadsworth, and Julie Morita, thank you so much.
Todd, thank you.